Welcome, everyone. Today, I'm honored to be joined by Cam Taylor, my new friend. Cam is a grief coach and mentor, speaker, author, and companion to those walking through loss. Cam's journey into grief work was forged through lived experience. From surviving a life-altering motorcycle accident to walking with his wife Vicky through terminal cancer. But rather than turning away from the pain, Cam leaned into it, dedicating his life to helping others navigate grief with honesty, resilience, and hope. Cam is the author of 2 books and an online course, which I'll let him talk about, and he's the voice behind goodgriefjourney.com. Welcome, Cam, and thank you for taking the time to have a conversation with me today. I really appreciate you being here. Please tell us a little more about your work and your resources.
Yeah, thanks so much, Dennis. I have really found this particular work so rewarding for myself. And there's so many different ways that I would love to connect with those that are grieving or with those that are really looking for resources to support grieving people. My website really is the place where you'll find everything that I have to offer. It's called goodgriefjourney.com. And there you can find access to my latest book, which is Unlocking the Mystery of Grief, which is available where books are sold. And then there's my video course is there, but there's also some PDFs around 50 ways to grieve your losses. If you've ever wondered, am I normal? As well as a companioning course that will help you if you're looking for handles and ways to help people that are grieving. And also, you can connect with me personally by signing up for a conversation. And I offer that free to you, a 30-minute conversation to see if I might be able to work with you as a coach, as a mentor on the journey that you're on.
Yeah, I love that. That's how you and I met. I watched you being interviewed by someone else, and then you said that same thing, that we can just reach out to you directly and spend some time with you. And we did that, and I thought that was super, super helpful for me. So thank you for that. So I encourage you, whoever's listening to this, please take some time and reach out to Cam. He's great to talk to. Has a ton of resources and depth and knowledge in this space. And for me, this is it gets pretty personal because I'm a hospice chaplain, so I'm around loss and grief all day long. And so I'd like to kind of just dive in and try to talk about maybe understanding the nature of grief. But what do you wish every chaplain or counselor remembered when working with someone who's going through deep sorrow?
That is a great question that I think really defines how we need to show up, any of us, with those who have had a loss. And in particular, when you're in a position that people are kind of looking to you for guidance, you need to show up definitely by taking off your expert hat. And to me, one of the key factors and ingredients that people need when they've gone through loss, which leaves them in this world of fog and the inability to even almost think straight, starts with you simply showing up and being present and not feeling like you need to have the right answers or you don't need to fix it. You don't even have to say anything, but it starts with you showing up and being with them. And then with those very simple questions or comments, thanks for allowing me to just spend a few minutes with you. And then let them share what they want to share. Because when somebody is going through grief, especially in those early stages, you want to let them be the leader in the conversation. And even though you may have these expert titles, chaplain, counselor, they are the expert of their grief. Yes, you bring some ideas and things that maybe eventually you'll get to, but especially early on, you want them to know that you are a safe person who will help validate what they're experiencing.
So good. So when a person is experiencing intense grief, anger, denial, maybe despair, what do you actually do in the room while you're with them?
That's another great question. And I think it's important to know what to do.
Yeah.
Because it's one thing, yes, now I'm present. Okay, that's step one. You're in the room. You're not so scared that you've run down the hallway. So now you're in the room. But I think it is important to know, where do you look, what do you say, how do you act? And I would say, let me just give you a few phrases that I found helpful. And it's very important that whatever you say, you you give them the opportunity to either take that idea and run with it or not. Because sometimes people that are grieving, they want to talk, they want to tell their story. Other times they just want to be left alone. And so you have to really discern, what does this person need? What do they want? So you could say things like, it might be a little bit overused, but say phrases like, I'm so sorry for your loss. And that's where I want to give us some ideas to be a little more creative. To say things like, my heart really does go out to you in this time of pain and sadness. Or another phrase could be something like, you're you're in my thoughts. And if they're people that are praying people, you can definitely say, I will be praying for you during this difficult time in your life. So those are a few ideas, but definitely you want to let them give you clues to maybe another question. Tell me more about the person that you lost. What were they like? And but only if they sort of start to take you down that road. So those are a couple ideas that I think would be helpful.
If it gets pretty shocking, like if someone says something hopeless or even spiritually conflicted, how would you recommend or suggest anyone that's caring for them, right, respond in that moment?
One thing that I think is a good rule of thumb, and I lead a grief group at my local hospice. I lead one twice a year, 8 weeks long. And what the people that come into the group are very much a mixed group. So mixed backgrounds, mixed belief systems. So everybody definitely potentially can be on a very different page. So one thing that I practice, and I would recommend this to really anybody that's helping people in grief, because in this day and age, there's so many different ways that people show up with different belief systems, is don't ever judge them for whatever crazy idea they may throw your way. You can say things like, that must be so hard. Or you can also sometimes mirror back what you heard them say. Something like, what I hear you saying is that you're feeling like you're having an out of body experience right now. And you don't have to agree with whatever that person is saying. That's a good thing to keep in mind, because you don't ever want to disagree with a grieving person, because that becomes an empathy blocker. It really shuts down their willingness to tell their story, which is so important for grieving people, to have their grief validated, whether you agree with what they're saying or not. So I think that's the trick, is to hold this tension and not feel like you have to be right, or you have to correct them if their idea is so far out there according to you that you want to make things right, because that is not your job in that particular setting.
My 15-year-old brain is telling me, like, all right, what if they say something like so wild and so off the wall, What would I do? And like, do I agree with that, or do I kind of ignore that? Do I try to redirect?
The other thing you do want to keep in mind is, you want to have your antennas up for a situation that might be dangerous for them, especially if they have any thoughts that seem, suicidal or whatever. And I know I'm very clear about the fact that that is not my area of expertise. And so I might want to say to them, if they say things like, I just feel like I want to go kill myself. And you might want to ask them, would you be willing for me to help find someone that you could talk to about that?
Yeah,
And I
good.
think saying things like that is very appropriate, because you want to make sure they stay safe. So
Yes.
in that situation, you have to discern whether or not you need to maybe refer them or help them get the kind of help that they need.
Yeah, very good. Very practical advice. That was really good for me. Thank you. Now, changing gears a little bit here, there's a lot of spiritual stuff that's going on. As me being a Christian, I see that quite a bit when I'm meeting with family. How do you walk with someone whose grief has shattered their faith or their view of God? Like someone that you've known and maybe you've met them before the loss happened, and then as you're walking with them through grief, how do you talk to them?
Yeah, and that is not an unfamiliar situation that I've run into as well. And I too am a Christian, and I have have had my own journey of wrestling with faith and wrestling with what is God up to, even when I was going through, especially my wife's cancer that came out of the blue. And so I think, again, it goes back to what I said earlier. If whatever the struggle is, if it's a faith struggle or other type of struggle they're having, you always want to validate whatever it is they're struggling with. And if they want to talk more, you want to kind of make space where they can tell you more. So for example, if they're saying, I hate God. God brought this sickness upon my loved one and now they're gone. What was God up to? And you could say something like, "Oh, I'm so sorry that you feel that God really deserted you. How did that make you feel?" And just let them continue to tell the story. And what sometimes happens, I think, and I have seen this even in my own life, is if they're allowed a safe space to unburden some of this pent up anger, because anger is normal.
Right.
They're not abnormal because they feel angry. And being mad at God is not unusual.
Right.
That's also normal. Let them feel that. And the Psalms, and if you have a growing relationship, I would say you might even want to say, you are not alone in
Right.
that feeling. David in Psalm, whatever, find one of the Psalms where he just tears a
The
strip
many
off of
Psalms.
God.
Right.
That's right. And if you feel like they're kind of open to that, you can kind of validate it and say you were not alone. Even a person like David felt the exact same way. And what did he do? He vented. You need to be allowed to vent. I want you to do that. So that's some of how I've handled it. And I might, given the right circumstances, tell my own story of when I was confronted with cancer and I saw a bumper sticker that said, "I hate cancer." No, no, that's not it. It was worse than that. It was "F you, cancer."
Yeah, I've seen those. Yeah.
And I was reading James 1 at the time, and it was like I was ready to just take a picture of that and send it to my wife, and we were so mad, right, at this cancer. And then it's like I heard this voice saying, "What good is that going to do? If you become filled with this hate, is that going to help you serve your wife?" And it's like instantly I felt like, you know what? I needed to vent that for sure.
Yeah.
But I also wanted to be the kind of person that could be there for my wife those last 6 weeks and serve her and be her best friend and her best caregiver. And the only way I could do that is I couldn't do it with resentment and bitterness.
Yeah, that's definitely a prompting of the Holy Spirit, and I'm so glad that you experienced that and also got to sense that and then and was obedient to that. Are there things like language maybe we can avoid in spiritual conversations with grieving people?
Yeah, there's a whole list of things not to say. And it's interesting when I'm with a group of grieving people, I'll ask them, "So, what are some things that you've heard people have said that were totally bizarre?" And they'll start to share them, and everybody's just getting so upset. Like, "Your family said that, your family member said that, and that person said that," and because they've all experienced it. But some of the ones that come to mind are things like, and this is, Christians are can be bad for this. Things like, "Well, they're in a better place." That is not helpful for a grieving person. Or I can't, I can't even get my head around that people actually would say it, but, God needed another angel.
Oh, goodness.
Phrases like that, which
Mm.
they're cruel to the person who's lost somebody that they've loved, a child or a spouse. Or another one that I heard, my father passed away at 92, and they said, "He lived a good life." Well, that's for me to say.
Yeah.
That's not for them to say. Don't determine that my grief is minimal because my dad was 92. And I'll say that about any of these statements. If the grieving person says them, that is totally fine. But you're not allowed to say those things that are insensitive, like the ones that I've just described. Or here's one more, quoting scripture verses that may be true, but they're unloving. Romans 8:28,
Yeah, I was just thinking that one.
right? You
Right.
know, all things work together for good for those who love God. That is not for a time of grief and loss. That's a time to meditate on that verse when the sun is shining so that you're ready for when losses come. Then you have something to fall back on. But do not bring it up when the person is suffering, is grieving for sure.
Yeah, and it goes back to what you said at the beginning of this is the ministry of presence, right? That's our main thing. And a lot of people will be listening to this, watching this, are going to be those who are giving care. They're going to be chaplains and grief counselors and coaches, mentors, and maybe even and doulas and maybe even nurses and social workers and then family members as well who are preparing themselves for how to deal with upcoming loss and grief for their family, maybe for their children, and it's really important because I don't. There's no perfect situation, right? You can't just do this, 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 and this. There's no logical way to look at this all the time. And so most of the times just be silent, right? Wasn't it Job with his three friends, right?
Mm.
Like if they were more silent, I could be wrong here, but was it
No,
God
it's
that's
right.
like, yeah, like
They talk way
remember
too much.
way too much, right? It wasn't even God who said like they should have just been silent, like they
Yeah,
shouldn't even. So
exactly.
I've learned from that, and I'm a talker, so that's just difficult for me to do,
Yeah.
especially. And I think it's also we want to give comfort, we just don't know how to. We think our words will heal them, but it's not gonna. It's gonna make it worse. I want to switch gears because of the people who are going to be listening and watching this. This is important for me. Practically, I'd like to know how do you suggest one recovers spiritually, mentally, physically after these heavy sessions or losses?
There's a lot of things that come to mind, and definitely the overarching theme and phrase that I've done lots of even Google searches with this phrase. It's self-care. What does that mean? How do I care for myself? Which is really what your question is. And how do you avoid wearing yourself out and really compassion fatigue, I think it's called sometimes too, right? Where we just have given, 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 given without spending time to be replenished. One of the things, I think this is more preventative than it is when you're in it, but one way to prevent wearing yourself out is to build resiliency into your life. And resiliency it looks very different, has different sort of ways that it can be described, or there's a whole group of resiliency muscles. And for example, tempered optimism is one that comes to mind, where for you to be able to have the mindset when you're caring for others that is able to continue to believe that things can get better, at least in some way, but also the awareness and the ability to cope with the harsh and the hard reality from day to day. I think that's important.
It's
Another
interesting.
resiliency muscle.
Yeah, yeah, definitely a resiliency muscle. I like that. We got to prepare ourselves. I know that there's a difference between absorbing grief and just holding space for it. What are some signs that a counselor or a chaplain or a caregiver is absorbing grief and not just holding space for it?
I think if you are not feeling joy, but how you would be described as more this weight, and also you look at your life, you look at your schedule, and you're not doing things that you enjoy anymore. Your hobbies have been left by the wayside. You're maybe binge watching Netflix. You're eating too much. You're over shopping. Whatever it is. If you are not doing the things that are enjoyable, that's one sign that you might be needing a little bit of a break. And I think you could also. There's lots of physical signs, and I've been through a season of almost burnout, is what I call it. And I think there's a lot of similarity because when I was a pastor, it was this always helping others, always feeling like my identity was wrapped up in what I was doing. And I think caregivers can sometimes match what they do with who they are. So I think that's another trap you have to watch for. If you look in the mirror and you say, "Who am I?" and what comes back to you is, I'm a caregiver." you've got a problem because you are more than what you do. And it's having that ability then to back up, maybe take a break, and to find out who you really are. And if you're a Christian, a follower of Jesus, to find out that you are a beloved son and daughter of your Father, and you don't have to do anything for his love. You don't have to prove it, right? And that was, I identity crisis when you're dealing with grief is a very real thing, and learning how to really identify who we are and to think as caregivers. Who am I? I am someone, and also to build other rooms in your house where you are fulfilled. I'm not just a caregiver. I'm a father. I'm a husband. I'm an athlete. I'm a bike rider. I'm a pickleball player. I'm an author. Like, I think we need to build capacity in our lives that includes more than just caregiving,
Right.
because we will burn out if that's who we are and that's all we do.
Some really good practical advice again. Thank you. Just to be aware of that is really important, and to have other people in my life. I think I need to tell them, hey, if you see this in me, these changes in me, please smack me out of it or something.
Yeah, for sure.
Let's go to the mountains, or let's go to the beach or something. Let's reset.
Yeah. I've got a
Um,
quick story I just want to tell
sure.
about how my daughter and I kept from burning out when we were actually caring for my wife who was dying. And because I was aware that we just couldn't be 24/7 because she was in our home. We set up hospice at home. So I lined up all 24 of the Marvel movies, and we started watching them in chronological order from number one. So that's a lot of time watching a
Yeah.
movie.
Yeah.
What
That's
we'd
cool.
do is we'd leave my wife in the bedroom, we'd go into the family room, turn on the movie, and watch it for an hour, and then push stop, and then go back. So it was like this. There's a term that I've heard. We needed to dose our grief. We needed to parcel it out and not think that we had to always be in that state of grieving. And I think it's the same, always be in this state of helping people. I think very similar. You have to find things, distractions that aren't for too long, that can breathe some life back into your soul.
That's good. I don't think I've ever heard that before. I love that, Cam. Final question on that. If you could give only one piece of advice to avoid burnout, what would that be?
My one piece of advice is practice self care. So that could include things like get regular exercise, get a proper night's sleep, learn to journal what you're feeling, learn to laugh a little bit every day, have friends that can love you for who you are and you can truly be yourself with, learn to meditate, have the input of other mentors, counselors, coaches, so that you can continue to be renewed and revived in your life. Self care. That's my one word.
What is one phrase that has caused the most harm? Unintentionally, maybe? Something that a caregiver might have said. If you have several, please. But if there's one phrase that caused the most harm that you've heard, please share that with us.
Well, the one that comes to mind, and I've seen this when I'm helping grieving people, and these are people that come, oftentimes their loved ones will pass away in hospice or in other situations. And I've heard this so many times that it's still shocking and it's so hurtful. And the phrase is this: you should be over this by now. And that's said by family members, said by spouses, children, friends. And what happens is it alienates the grieving person from those that they hoped were going to show them empathy and support. And that's often why they're actually in the grief group, because they no longer have people they feel safe with. So it is a empathy blocker. It cuts off people from the very love and care that they need to heal and to grieve thoroughly and well.
Well, let's end on a better note than that. What's one phrase that has brought the most comfort?
Another phrase, the phrase that comes to mind, and it's even shorter than the one I just gave you, which it's such a good one. It's you are not alone. And that is a phrase that you don't even have to say it if you show up because they feel it. But if you can say you are not alone, that's actually another empathy phrase that can encourage people. When people feel in grief that they are the only ones that are experiencing what they're experiencing. And yes, their grief will be unique to them, and you want to emphasize that. But when they start to hear the stories of others and they realize it's not only me that's got brain fog, that feels like I'm going crazy. There's such a peacefulness that comes over them. And I've seen it right in front of me. People believing that they're not alone and it can change everything.
Wow, that's so good. As far as services like you provide, what could you do for example, for a hospice agency that maybe a director or somebody might be listening to this and they need to maybe improve on their bereavement process? Do you provide services like that? Would you be willing to come and meet and talk and provide those kinds of services for new hospice agencies or hospice agencies that just need more attention?
No, absolutely. And I've done a lot of that kind of work with my local hospice where I've helped train volunteers. I've I've actually run their facilitator training. I'm actually taking a trip across the country and I'm going to train a whole group of facilitators who are starting a grief ministry in their church. I'm going to spend a whole day just helping support them. How do you actually start these groups that are open, where people can come and be heard? What do you say? What's the curriculum that we can use? So I definitely would love to be able to help anybody that's helping to set that up. And I've got a lot of different resources that I could help you with because I have not only done the training of hospice volunteers, but I've also, in the church context, plus I understand what the grieving person really needs. And I think the combination really makes it a pairing because I know what the person who comes for the help needs and also what you need to bring as that caregiver. So I think I've got a lot to offer in terms of training and tools and resourcing and coaching. And I'd love to help any way I could with that.
Yeah, and you do have a lot on your website. I'm going to mention that again here before we go. It's goodgriefjourney.com. Goodgriefjourney.com. You can learn more about Cam and his coaching and mentoring. His books are both on there as well. The newest one is Unlocking the Mystery of Grief, How to Grieve Well and Learn to Live Again After Loss. And then the course, Self-Paced Online Grief Course, that's on your website accessible,
That's
right?
on there as well, and it's a very affordable course that really walks you through my good grief journey, GOOD, which I've kind of developed through my own life. The Not a linear process, but a journey of these are the touch points that you want to look at. And the name of my video course is called Discover How to Live Again After Loss. So it really covers the gamut from when you have that loss to what does it look like to get back to living again and learning how to discover to actually live and carry that grief with you on into your journey and into the future.
This is great, Cam. I'm already talking to people about you and the families that I help. So if you're a chaplain, if you're a doula, if you're a caregiver, a family member, anyone, please help spread the news of Cam Taylor and what he can do in his services because they've been super helpful for me already. And I just believe I scratched the surface. I'm glad that we had this discussion. Cam, thank you so much for your time. You're always a pleasure to talk to. And I hope that we can do this again. Maybe we can dive even deeper into other topics. If you're listening to this and you have questions, please feel free to comment, email us, email Cam, set up time to talk to Cam. Invite him to your church, invite him into your agency, wherever these services can be used. I know that he's a great resource to have. So, Cam, thank you so much, my friend. Do you have anything else you'd like to say before we close out here?
Well, I do just want to thank you, Dennis, for the opportunity to. I say the same thing. You're one of my new friends. And I
Thank you.
just feel like we have such a synergy that between us that I really appreciate. The other thing is I've done a lot of work virtually. So regardless of where you are, I would still be able to provide support virtually, even training. I've done facilitator training, grief training. I've done the whole volunteer training online. So I've worked both in online as well as in person, and so that's also there as well. But thanks again, Dennis, for the opportunity to speak with you. This is really a meaningful part of what I do, and I thank you for that opportunity.
Absolutely. Thanks for bringing that up. Cam, have a great rest of your day. Thank you so much.
Same to you. Yeah. Bye bye.